Hello, and welcome to this exciting episode of Ranking the World's Worst People. In this channel, we walk you through the life and evil acts of the worst people in the whole world, and then we rank them at the end of each episode. Our goal is to put all the worst people who have ever lived in a single league with videos that let you know exactly what they've done. In today's episode, we'll be taking a look at John McAfee. Being a genius can be used for bad and good, earning you the title of either being a hero or a villain. Our subject for this video has been tagged as both over the past few years. While it's up to your comments to decide if he deserves a position on our list, we're going to provide all the information you need. How does a Silicon Valley success story become an international fugitive? This is the story of John McAfee, the man who helped develop the first commercial antivirus software. But just before we start digging, leave a comment to let us know what score you would give him after learning about his scandals. And be sure to watch this video to the end to find out what we think he deserves. Also, click that like button now because you're definitely going to like this video. Done that? Alright, let's get started. Who is John McAfee? John David McAfee was born on the 18th of September 1945 in Gloucestershire, United Kingdom. His father, an American soldier stationed to the U.S. Army base, and his British mother soon moved to Roanoke, Virginia, where McAfee grew up. In Virginia, his father worked as a road surveyor, and his mother was a bank teller. McAfee's childhood was largely troubled by his father's heavy drinking, which led to severe beatings for young McAfee and his mother. Despite the family troubles, McAfee excelled in school, and he was dedicated to furthering his education. His father committed suicide by a gunshot when McAfee was just 15 years old. His difficult childhood would go on to affect his interpersonal relationships and general mistrust of people and situations. McAfee got accepted into Roanoke College and started drinking excessively in his first year while supporting himself with the profits he got from the sale of magazine subscriptions. But he spent almost all of the money on alcohol, fostering his addiction. Nonetheless, he graduated and, in 1968, he started pursuing his doctorate degree in mathematics at the Northeast Louisiana State College. He was kicked out of the school before he could complete his PhD because he had been sleeping with an undergraduate student who he was supposed to be mentoring. Soon after he left Northeast College, McAfee started coding punch card programs in Bristol, Tennessee. He was working for Univac, a company that produced punch cards, but the job didn't last very long as he was arrested for buying marijuana, which led to him being fired. McAfee was smarter than the average person, so he was able to build up his resume. He got a new job working at Missouri Pacific Railroad in St. Louis, where he used the IBS computing system to schedule train routes and excelled at it. It's also where he started using LSD and experimenting with other psychedelic drugs, and, obviously, those don't lead to anything good. The birth of McAfee Antivirus. John McAfee is exceptional when it comes to software technology, and his portfolio speaks volumes. In 1968, McAfee got employed by NASA's Institute for Space Studies in New York City, and he worked as a programmer there till 1970. Then he worked at Univac as a software designer, before going to Xerox as an operating system architect. By 1978, McAfee was a software consultant for Computer Sciences Corporation. From 1980 to 1982, he worked at the Booz Allen Hamilton consulting firm. Now, during the 1980s, McAfee was employed by Lockheed, and it was while working there that he received a copy of the Brain computer virus. Two brothers in Pakistan had coded the first computer virus in 1986 out of sheer curiosity and named it Brain. The Brain virus was aimed at personal computers, also known as PCs, and wasn't actually designed to destroy anything on the computers. The brothers only wanted to see how fast and how far the virus could spread on computers around the world. In the code script of the virus, they included their names, addresses, and telephone numbers. When John McAfee received the virus, he wasn't completely aware of its nature, but he knew how much damage it could cause. Almost immediately, McAfee started developing antivirus software to tackle the problem. The antivirus, named after McAfee himself, was the first commercial antivirus software. In 1987, he founded McAfee Associates, a computer antivirus company that was incorporated by 1992 in Delaware. A year after McAfee Associates was set up, the phone lines were going off. People were frantic, and Brain was infecting computers everywhere in the world. McAfee Associates started right from his 700-square-foot home in Santa Clara, and his plan was only to create the antivirus program and give it to users online, without expecting them to pay. He only wanted them to need his antivirus software at corporate organizations. He marketed with everything from interviews, door-to-door installations, and pretty much any method you can think of. Very soon, everyone knew they had to have the McAfee antivirus, and they were willing to pay for a copy of McAfee's intelligence. From small offices to Fortune 100 companies, everyone was using the McAfee antivirus software. And by 1990, he was making $5 million on a yearly basis from license fees and sales of his program. By 1994, John McAfee resigned from McAfee Associates as a very wealthy tech entrepreneur. Shortly after his resignation, McAfee sold his shares for over $100 million, and that is when his eccentric nature came to full bloom. Silicon Valley's wild child. John McAfee is often referred to as strange and eccentric, a personality that some have associated with his previous stints of drug and alcohol abuse. He spent the money he made from selling his company shares on everything lavish you can ever imagine. McAfee bought 9 houses and furnished them with the most expensive furniture, splashing artworks in each. But that's not enough to blow $100 million, so he got a fleet of aircraft, filled his garage with exotic vintage cars, and lived a comfortable, splendor-filled life. He had moved to Silicon Valley, the heart of technology and inventions, and lived there for almost 20 years. At that time, he had already attained legendary status as the first tech person to develop an effective antivirus program. So he was consulting for startups, lecturing based on invitations, and had several academic papers written about him. McAfee started a yoga institute near his Colorado Rockies mansion, and even wrote 4 books about spirituality. But somehow, he couldn't quiet the turmoil and restlessness he was experiencing. By the late 2000s, McAfee started to resent the life he was living in Silicon Valley. With the luxury and possessions, the economic collapse of 2008 had also hit him pretty badly, and he almost couldn't afford his lifestyle anymore. There were also several lawsuits scheming up against him, so as a true eccentric, he auctioned off a larger portion of his properties, which include a private airport in New Mexico, and he started looking for a more remote location to escape to. In the Caribbean, he soon found a villa on Ambergris Caye in Belize, and after looking at the property on Google Earth, he bought it. And that's where the most dramatic phase of his life began. Belize and the murder. When John McAfee moved to the sparsely populated country of Belize, John McAfee was in love with everything about it. He felt like he had found peace, but trouble would always wind up his way. Shortly after he arrived in Ambergris Caye, he bought 2.5 acres of land along the New River, and in the next year, he spent over $1 million constructing thatched roof bungalows. He lived excitedly, far from the worries of social media and the internet. But he was an entrepreneur, so he started a cigar manufacturing business, a coffee distribution company, and a water taxi service. McAfee rapidly gained a reputation among the locals, and while the majority of them adored him, there were some who simply hated his guts. From local gangs to his own neighbor, he didn't get along with a lot of people. The little village of Carmelita, which was a short distance from his property, had become McAfee's little project. He had found out that the village was a major shipment transit for drugs going into Mexico, and it was basically lawless. So, he built a small cell and set up cops, who soon became his little army. McAfee didn't ask for permission from the village heads, and he just went about his mission. A millionaire in a tiny village trying to restore order and prevent crime. While he was allegedly sober for over a decade, McAfee's eccentricities were still on the high end, but it wasn't enough to cause trouble, until a few years after he moved to Belize. McAfee had about 9 dogs on his property, and his neighbor at Ambergris Caye, Gregory Fall, constantly expressed complaints about the noise coming from McAfee's compound. This would later be the first in a sequence of events. In 2012, a government representative for a local politician visited McAfee to proposition a deal with him. McAfee was to support the politician's campaign with $2 million, and in return, he would get tax exemptions and lands in the country. McAfee refused the offer, and a week later, the police raided his property. but they couldn't charge him with anything, so he was let go. Shortly after this event, the representative returned and asked if he had reconsidered, but McAfee's response was still the same as the first time. Weeks later, everything broke loose. On the 10th of November, 2012, McAfee's dogs were all poisoned, and he had to shoot some of them to end their suffering. Despite his neighbors' threats to shoot the dogs in the past, McAfee didn't think the man was responsible for their poisoning. But this would prove inconsequential on the next morning after the death of McAfee's dogs, when Greg Fall was found dead in his home. As expected, the Belizean police sought out McAfee to question him about his neighbor's death, since he was identified as the main person of interest, but McAfee was nowhere to be found. As soon as the cops left, McAfee went on the run, believing that whoever killed Greg Fall had meant to kill him. The police and the press believed he had carried out the killings to avenge his beloved dogs. Who do you think it was? The corrupt politician or McAfee's vengeance? Let us know in the comments section. McAfee escaped Belize to Guatemala and tried to hide out there, but he was apprehended by the local police, and they were going to send him back to Belizean authorities. McAfee faked a heart attack, and in a few days he was deported to the United States, where he has remained since. Controversies. John McAfee has lived a very interesting and eccentric life, which borders on the edge of some very disturbing controversies surrounding his lifestyle. While in Belize, McAfee lived with several prostitutes, all of whom he built bungalows for on his property. He has often been quoted saying he felt drawn to people who've had very challenging lives, like prostitutes and the handicapped. He could relate to their struggles, and so he sought comfort in doing what he could to alleviate their situations. This is very questionable, but he hasn't rebuffed the claims. In fact, he admitted that the girls were teenagers and young adults, ranging from ages 17 to 20. Aside from the obvious of his unspecified role in the death of Greg Fall, another highly controversial aspect of McAfee's life in Belize are the allegations he faced for illegal drug manufacturing. He met Alison Adonizio, a microbiologist, in 2010 and decided to sponsor her research into a new range of antibiotics. He set up a lab, bought equipment, and hired assistants for Alison. McAfee had already created a solution for viruses that affect computers, and he was excited to create one for viruses that affect humans. The local authorities were convinced that he was running an illegal drug manufacturing lab and raided the facility. But the news had leaked to the US press, and McAfee was accused of making meth on the island. It was also alleged that he had raped Alison Adonizio. McAfee's business relationship with Alison was strained before the problems started, due to his constant paranoia, and she had left the country. There were several other controversies surrounding McAfee, particularly about his time in Belize. They all sum up to one thing, though. He had gone in search of adventures and simply stirred up trouble, then fled the scene. Media and political ambitions. After news of the murder in Belize reached the United States, the press constantly followed John McAfee's every move, but he's never been officially questioned or charged with the murder. Still, headlines about him are everywhere on the internet. A documentary about his time in Belize called Gringo, The Dangerous Life of John McAfee aired on Showtime Networks in September 2016. His widely publicized interview on ABC's 2020 segment is still making the rounds on media. In addition to the media frenzy, McAfee also ruffled feathers when he announced his intention to run for the presidency under the Libertarian Party in 2016. He lost at the party primaries. Then he ran in 2020 for the position of vice president, but once again, he was not nominated. McAfee continues to be identified as a libertarian, advocating for the decriminalization of marijuana and cybersecurity. What do you think? John McAfee was not a saint in his morals, behavior, or personality. There is always the off chance that the media may play things out of proportions, but when all evidence points towards one person, it is hard to think otherwise. His ideas may have saved the world a lot of money, but his actions have caused a lot of people a lot of trouble. So what do you think? Is John McAfee really one of the worst people in the world? Well, here's what we think. Ratings. John McAfee may have had good intentions fueled by paranoia, but the outcomes were usually horrible for everyone else involved. The answer to the question of whether or not he is responsible for the allegations remains up to the authorities, but we can work with the information available to rank his personality. So, based on our system, if 1 is burning toast on purpose and 100 is burning a house down on purpose, we'd give John McAfee the ranking score of 23. How would you rate him? Let us know in the comments below. At the end of this 10-episode season, we will gather all the ratings from the comments and publish our league ranking of the worst people in the world. Thank you for watching this episode. Comment down below who you want to nominate for the next season. You can support us on Patreon to be able to vote for the next 10 people in our upcoming season. We have 6 more episodes lined up with some of the world's worst people in this first season. So don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and turn on the notifications bell so you'll know when the next person gets unraveled. If you need to learn more about our ranking system, watch this short introduction video. Until next time, goodbye.